folks, let's get into Act 1, Scene 2. Very famous scene. It's probably, for me anyway, it's the best scene in the play in terms of Shakespeare's language. It's incredible. And it demonstrates that we live in this world where, imagery is, it's stimulated by, technology. Like we were able to imagine things because we're so used to seeing things being imagined through, CGI, through movie cameras and so on. Shakespeare had none of that. Shakespeare's audience had none of that. All Shakespeare had were his words and his ability to stimulate his audience's imagination. And he certainly does it in this scene. So I'm going to go through this note pretty quickly. I won't read the notes line for line in these videos. I'd ask you to do that. They're in your notes book. But I'm going to just introduce some of the concepts and then look at the key quotes. So what we've got here is a scene which features the King of Scotland. His name is Duncan. And we find that Duncan is much loved and admired. But we also find that he's maybe not very good at his job because his kingdom is in tumult. That means chaos. Now, the king's duty is to use the power that's given to him by God, that's his divine right, to bring order to the kingdom. But we find in this scene that the kingdom is not in order, it's in chaos. Shakespeare uses the scene to kind of give us a brief overview of what's going on in the kingdom. We learn that Duncan has two sons. Their names are Malcolm and Donalbain. And we learn that there's a battle going on because this wounded sergeant comes to them and tells them what's going on in the battle. So, of course, when the sergeant tells them what's going on, we learn as well. And we learn that there's been a rebellion. A Scottish nobleman called, it's pronounced Macdonald, as in Mackie D's, but there's a W in it, Macdonwald. We learn that he has rebelled against his king. Now again, that is an act of base treachery. And again, it goes against the natural order. But if he has rebelled, that suggests that maybe Duncan is perceived as somehow as weak. So at first it seemed Macdonald was going to be successful. He hired this mercenary army of Irish soldiers. But then he was defeated and killed by Macbeth, we learn. And when Macbeth is described, he's described in glowing terms as a brave warrior, but also as an utterly merciless man. And the description of Macbeth here is deliberately designed to create this sense of him as a hero. But it also, the description is of a man covered from head to toe in blood. So it also establishes this connection between Macbeth and blood and this connection, this suggestion that he is a really ruthless killer. And of course, that's core to his character. We also learn, I always think of Hulk Hogan when I think of this, the wrestler, that not only has that Macbeth has defeated the rebel army, hooray, 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 and he turns around and looks up and oh shit, here come the Vikings. So Scotland's really in tumult because not only has there been a rebellion, but there's also been an invasion. And the invasion is led by Swenno. I always think he should be from the flats. All right, Swenno, what's the story? Swenno, the king of the Vikings, the Norwegian lord. And he's been assisted by another Scottish traitor who's called the Thane of Cawdor. All of this stuff might be a bit much, but we'll figure it all out as we go along. And Macbeth and his army and his best friend and fellow Thane or Lord Banquo, not only are they exhausted having defeated the rebel army, but now they've got to turn around and fight the bloody Vikings. So it's a very dramatic story that's being told. And not only does he fight the Vikings, we learn from a new reporter, a lord who comes in to keep the story going, to tell the king and thereby us, the Thane of Ross, that not only was Macdonald the traitor, but the Thane of Cawdor was a traitor, that Macbeth met them in battle at a place called Fife and defeated them. So Macbeth is Scotland's saviour. He has saved Duncan's crown. He has saved Scotland from rebels. He has saved Scotland from the Norwegian invaders. Macbeth is a hero. Very, very, very important. But those bloody descriptions of his prowess or skill or aptitude on the battlefield are a little disturbing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a quick look at some of the really important quotes from this scene. I love the sergeant's description of the rebel, the merciless Macdonald, worthy to be a rebel, for so that the multiplying villainies of nature do so swarm upon him. Now this is not a quote I would necessarily learn, but I like it because of the association it creates between utter corruption and rebelling against your king. It helps us understand that idea of the natural order, that fundamental idea that to be righteous is to be loyal, to be disloyal is to be utterly corrupt. So this guy, the imagery is amazing, isn't it? That the villainies of nature, all of the possible sins and corruptions that we're capable of, swarm on Macdonald. Why? Because he's rebelled against his king. The first quote that you learn from this scene, put it in your list of quotes to learn, is of course, "For brave Macbeth, well he deserves that name. Disdaining fortune, with his brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution." Just that bit, but I love the rest of it. "Like valor's minion, carved out his passage, till he faced the slave, which ne'er shook hands with him, nor ne'er shook hands, nor bade farewell to him, till he," and you learn this as well, "unseamed him from the nave to the chops, and fixed his head upon our battlements." Wow! Did you understand any of it? Look at the imagery. Look at the last bit first. What did Macbeth do to Macdonald when he fought his way through to him? He didn't arrest him. He didn't question him. He delivered justice. Macbeth is the personification of justice at the beginning of the play. What is justice? What was the punishment for killing a king? It was to be hanged, drawn and quartered. And part of that process was to be disemboweled. So that's Macbeth. Look what he does. He unseamed him. So that means to open him up, slice him open with a sword from his nave to his chops. So he unseamed him, disemboweling him. And then the second part of that was to be beheaded. And he fixed his head upon our battlements, which meant that he chopped his head off. So there's Macbeth on the battlefield, brutally but righteously killing the rebel, administering justice. And he's described as the servant of bravery. It's a great example of imagery in the play. Valor's minion. Macbeth is as heroic as it's possible to be. He is brave Macbeth. He has earned that name. Well, he deserves that name. And then this description of him, disdaining fortune, not caring about himself, selfless, devoted to his king, devoted to his nation, putting himself on the line to save his country, with his brandished steel, holding a sword, and then that wonderful, wonderful cinematic image of the sword. Sorry. Come on. There we go. Of the sword, which smoked with bloody execution. You know those computer games or movies that you watch and there's blood spray, you know, the spatter? Well, here's Shakespeare doing it hundreds of years before the invention of cinema. His sword smoked. You can see the vapour. You can see the blood spraying up as Macbeth carves, like you carve meat, people out of his way till he gets to the traitor. Macbeth is the hero. He is the great and lauded saviour of Scotland. He appears to be the personification of all that is good in a servant of a king. And the king realises that not only has he been served by Macbeth, but he also realises that he has been betrayed by another Thane, another lord, the Thane of Cawdor. And he says this, I love this. "No more that Thane of Cawdor shall deceive our bosom interest. Go, pronounce his present death, and with his former title, greet Macbeth." And there we have Duncan, and an interesting insight into Duncan's strengths and weakness as a king. It's a good one to learn. First of all, we can see that Duncan is naive. He has been deceived by somebody who he held close to his bosom. That means that he absolutely trusted the Thane of Cawdor. that the Thane of Cawdor was in his inner circle, and he didn't have the cop on to realise that the Thane of Cawdor was a traitor. So that's a weakness. But the way he responds to the revelation of treachery, that's a strength. He immediately acts and punishes the villain and rewards the loyal. So Cawdor is executed, and then all of his titles and all of his lands are given to Macbeth. So Duncan is doing what a king is supposed to do. He's punishing those who sin and he's rewarding those who serve. A very interesting insight into his role as king, and a great quote to illustrate the theme, one of the great themes of the play, of appearance versus reality. So there you have your key quotes from Act 1, Scene 2. There are loads of others, but we're only starting off this. There's 3 quotes to get learning for brave Macbeth. Well, he deserves that name. Disdaining fortune with his brandished steel, which smoked with bloody execution. Then, till he unseamed him from the nave to the chops and fixed his head upon our battlements. And no more that Thane of Cawdor shall deceive our bosom interest. I love that language, the meter. Go pronounce his present death, and with his former title, greet Macbeth. Outstanding. What a great scene that is.